Hello, good afternoon. My name is Mark Reynolds. I'm the educational sales rep for Reddig Music, and I'm also the director of percussion for the Ohio State University Marching Band. Today what we're going to do is we're going to talk about tuning a snare drum. It's one of those things that a lot of people always ask, well, how do you tune your snare drum? Or how does this person tune their snare drum, or that person, or this group? There really isn't any strong way to say, yes, this is how you should tune your instrument, this is how not to do it. A lot of people have just found ways that kind of appeal to them and their sound that they have for their marching band, and just the process that they go through to tune the bottom head, tune the top head, tune the snares, all that stuff kind of goes into making your sound of what you want. So this is by no means like the absolute way that you should do it. This is just the way that I've been doing it for over 20 years. And we're going to give you a couple little hints on some stuff to look for when you're taking your snare drum from your marching percussion section, let's say at the high school, and trying to find out why it maybe doesn't sound as good. So I'll point those out as we go along. Today, what I'm using here is I have a Pearl FFX carbon core snare drum. It's the snare drum that we use at Ohio State is Pearl. We're using just the stock Pearl ST head on the bottom, which is just a clear, and I'll show you that in a little bit. And on the top, what I'm going to put on it is the head that I prefer, which is a Remo White Max head. At Ohio State, we still use the clear kind of power stroke heads by Remo, which are great, awesome. But for everyday use, in terms of high school marching percussion, I love the Remo White Max. It gets a nice bright sound, but not too bright, and it gets warm. It has a great fundamental tone to it, and I love this head, and it should last you a while. You put this head on there, and it should last you a pretty good amount of time. So again, this is the Remo White Max, and I'm just putting it on. I put it on so that the crown, the Remo crown, is in front of me at the top. Some people put them the opposite way so that the Remo is down here. I've just always put it on the top, no big deal. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to put the drum on, the hoop on, and we're just going to kind of get these started in basically the holes, and just kind of get a good idea of basically trying to get these finger tight as much as you can. And we're going to run these all the way down to get to the bottom of the tension rod that meets the hoop. And right now I'm going around in a circle. You know, you can go clockwise or counterclockwise. I'm just going around in a circle right now just to get them put into the head, just to get them into the tension rod into the casing. And we're just gonna get those going until they are basically just enough to run down onto the hoop. Now normally I would have 2 drum keys, so I could go a little faster, but I think my son might have stole my other key. So I've got one here that I'm using, which is just a normal T-handle high torque key. And again, we're just getting this down to kind of where everything meets, and we can start to get some sort of tone out of it, and where it starts giving you a little bit of resistance. Until it yeah. It's kind of like watching paint dry, right? Watching me tighten that up. All right. So we have a starting point now at this point. Now the key is to try to get the drum in tune with itself. And what I mean by that is it's kind of like tightening or loosening up the lugs on your car wheel. You want to make sure that you go in a cross pattern so that it doesn't, you know, get the, you know, if you just keep going around the right side and you keep cranking that up, then the left side is going to start pushing up a little bit, and it just puts a lot of undue stress on the tension posts, which are these down here. So I just try to make it as even as possible. And what I'm going to try to do is I'm just going to do, you know, 2 like quarter turns. And try to get the drum so that it feels, and some of these will start to get a little looser just because you're tightening up the rest of it. So you got to get it to a point where it kind of grabs. As you can see, that one there, I had to turn a lot because that was one of my last tension rods. So get this going, once again, to the cross. And I go, this might be a little different, but I go top here, top, bottom here, top here, bottom here, and then I go cross, 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 and then cross, 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 cross. And part of that is just so I can, it's just easier for me to keep track of, but I'm still maintaining what I want it to be, which is, you know, tuning nice and even. And again, some of those last ones that I'm doing right now are a lot looser than the first ones because we're putting more and more tension, more and more torque on the hoop as we go down. All right, now we should be able to hear a little bit of some tone. I'm going to turn the snare off here. And I go around and just touch the tension rods just right by the tension rods so I can hear the pitch. And what I'm trying to do is I'm trying to get all the tension rods, all the casings and everything kind of lined up and in tune with itself. So what I'll do is, for the sake of time, I'll just start putting a little more tension on this. Okay. Now we're going to hear the pitch, the top, up quite a bit now. So again, I go around. Okay, so that's pretty good for right now. And now once I have it fairly in tune, then I just go around 1 quarter turn, and some of these again will be a little loose as you go around. You just find where you're getting some pushback on it and then do your quarter turn. That one needed a little more. Okay, so now we're starting to get up there a little bit. So now is where it gets a little touchy, because some people say, oh, I want my snare drum to sound like a snare drum, you know, which means they don't want it to sound like tabletop, like really high pitched. Some people say, oh, I don't want that old school snare sound. I kind of go somewhere in the middle. And the biggest thing to remember is as you're taking the top head up, it's easier to keep going up than it is to go down. Once you get that head to seat and it starts sounding decent and you got it all in tune with itself, and you do just a quarter turn, I would say right there, I would stop right now. And now what I'm going to do is I'm going to work on the bottom head. And this is usually where people kind of make a mistake. They put the top head higher in pitch than the bottom head. And that is never really a good idea and trying to generate a lot of air to go through the chamber to resonate the snares on the snare bed. So it just works out better to have the higher pitch on the bottom so that it really resonates and almost snaps the snare drums. The actual bottom head and the ring that you get from the bottom head is actually where you get projection in a stadium. So some people will tape their snares, or they'll put a little patch on here to dry the snares out. I personally don't do that, and I want the drum to ring. I want the drum to resonate. We try to teach kids to get a great quality of sound all the time, playing into the head, make sure everything is resonating, and then we turn around and we tape up snares and put patches on bottom heads and that sort of thing. I'm not saying that's wrong. Again, it's like pizza. Some like pepperoni, some just like cheese, whatever it is. This is just my opinion. I like the drum to ring full resonant, just kind of like horns. Like if you have a trumpet and you want your trumpet section to sound resonant and have a great quality of sound, you wouldn't start putting tape on the outside of the bell, right? Because you would want that to ring out and to resonate, because that's what's going to get you coverage and carried up to the press box in a stadium. So the bottom head, I already kind of started a little bit, and you can hear to me that's pretty low. So I'm going to start taking this bottom head up, and again I do the same thing. I do 2 lugs, 2 tension rods at a time, and a cross pattern. And again, as you're starting to get the pitch up, some of your last few will be a little loose. So you just kind of go and feel it out until it stops and gives you a little resistance, and then you keep going on it. So again, we're going to take this head up, and I'm going to stop here after this round so you can kind of hear the difference. And I've already kind of went around and checked to make sure that it was in tune. So now that's considerably higher than what we started with. And I just know in my ear like where I want it to go. Some people say, what pitch do you tune it to? I don't tune it to a specific pitch, because I really believe that different brands of drums get different different brands of drums have a different sort of sweet spot where they sound really good with heads. And I've worked with the Pearl for so long, I kind of have a good idea of where that sweet spot is. And like I said, it's different tuning the regular Championship FFX with maple than it is tuning this FFX with maple and carbon fiber inlay. It just has a different sort of sweet spot. Not good or bad or anything, like that. It's just different. So I would still want to take that up a little more. And again, the higher you can get the bottom head to set in that sweet spot where it resonates the snare shell and resonates the snare bed, the more coverage that you're going to get, and the more the drum sound is going to carry up in the press box, which is what we all want. A lot of people will say, oh, when I get up in the middle of the press box, it doesn't sound like a snare drum, it sounds like a tom. Well, that's why. Because the sound is not carrying, it's not resonating enough, so it's not resonating the snares enough to get it up to the press box. So let's see, I still know I need that to go up a little more. And now let's talk, as I finish this round up, let's talk about the snare guts. Okay, the snare guts are really important. I've already kind of went through and tuned these. All snare drums have these screws in the sides of them that when you look at them, a small little Phillips screwdriver. And I usually take my drum key, turn the snare off. After I kind of get the head where I think I want it, I take the drum key, the T key, and I just press up against it like this so that it puts a little tension on the snare so you can kind of hear it, and hopefully you can hear that on there. And I've gone through already and just kind of tuned the snares and tightened them. Because what you want is you want the snares to be in tune with themselves. You can almost like pluck them like guitar strings and hear what that sounds like. Because the more the higher pitch those are, again, the more snappier it is off the snare bed and off the snare head, the bottom head. So now you can turn the snare drum on, turn the snares on, and I usually touch just to make sure that the snare guts are actually touching the snare head over the snare bed. The one thing that I see a lot of times when a band director says, man, I can't get my snare to sound good. It sounds dead. It sounds, weird. Usually what that is kids have a tendency to turn knobs. When it doesn't sound the way they want it to, instead of kind of knowing the process and how to get it to sound good and get the sound they want, they just start cranking on things and they make things tighter and choke them off. And most of the time, they're adjusting this vertical, right here, this vertical adjustment screw. And when you adjust the vertical adjustment screw, it brings the snares up and down. And most of the time, if you look at it, you want the snares to lay exactly flat on to the snare bed and onto the head. And a lot of times what happens is kids will crank these and it'll start to bend over the snare bed. And that actually chokes the snare guts and gets that weird choked sound where it doesn't sound like a snare drum. So I'm gonna hit this and just kind of hear what this sounds like right now. I've got the bottom head kind of where I want it. Top head might not be close yet, but we're gonna check it out. But I wanted to get the bottom head and the snares tuned the way I wanted it. Yeah. So already we have a pretty good sound, and that's the great thing about that combination. I've just worked with it a lot with the Pearl FFX and the top snare with the Remo White Max and the Pearl carbon core. It's a really easy drum to just kind of put together, put some heads on, and get it going. Again, following the fundamentals of getting the bottom head pretty high up there in pitch, and getting the snares laying flat along the cross the snare bed, and getting the head where it feels comfortable. Because believe it or not, it has to feel comfortable to play. Some people that really crank it up, it can be really hard on the kids' hands and on their wrists, and create some injuries with as hard as high school kids are playing now. So this actually, that would be a pretty good sound right now, I think, for me, with a lot of high school groups. That sounds pretty good. We're getting a good snare response, at least here in my home office. We're getting a pretty good snare response. It's projecting. It has a good resonant sound. Now let's just see real quick. If you want to take it up a little bit, if you don't like it as wet. Now that sound that I just played, that would be great if you have a smaller band, like under 100 winds, maybe 3 snares, 2 tenors, 4 bass drums, or 5 bass drums. That would be a pretty nice wide open sound that you would get a lot of good sounds from. So now we took it up a little bit. So now that's more in line, and I didn't have to touch it a lot, but now that's more in line. And again, if you listen, play over the snare bed, we're still getting a really nice snare response on, coming from the snare beds generated through the high pitch of the bottom head. And again, I'm going to take it up one more time, and this would be another option. And I won't take it all the way up where some people have it and like it. I just think it kind of takes away the character of the snare. But this is where this is now. So it's not as resonant. It's a little more choked sounding because the top head is getting a little closer to the pitch of the bottom head. And again, over the snare bed, that's the key. When you're playing at pianissimo or piano, being able to hear that snare response all the way through is a great thing. So again, it's not my way is the right way or anything like that. Just give you some tips. Again, take a look at, when you look at your snare drums at school, turn them over, look at them flat where the snares lie across the bed. Chances are, if you're not getting the sound you want, that's because they're folded up over, they're being pulled over the snare bed, which gets a choke sound and won't let the snares resonate. And also check to make sure that your bottom head is tighter than your top head, higher in pitch. If that's the case, then you should be able to get a really good sound out of your snare drum, no matter what drums you're using. So best of luck, and I hope this video helped. Thanks.